want to go traveling and have a story in a faraway land, in Africa, a story about a real elephant. And then she says he wants to see a real elephant. So let's go to Africa and see a real elephant. Everybody on the merry-go-round, hang on tightly. And here is an elephant, a real elephant, an elephant's child. See what a big trunk he has, look. How he can pick up things, how well he uses it. Yes. Well, then let's have a story about times when elephants didn't have trunks like our elephant's child. Oh, see all the things he can do with it. Yes, they're useful, aren't they? But once upon a time in India, the elephants didn't have trunks like these. The elephant had a trunk, that was blackish and not much bigger than a boot. He could wriggle it from side to side, but he couldn't pick up things with it. But there was one elephant, an elephant's child, who had insatiable curiosity. That meant he was always asking questions. He would ask his tall aunt the ostrich why her tail feathers grew just so. And his great aunt the ostrich would spank him with her hard, hard claw. And he asked his tall uncle the giraffe why his skin was so spotty. And his tall uncle the giraffe spanked him with his hard, hard hoof. And he asked his broad aunt the hippopotamus why her eyes were so red. And his broad aunt the hippopotamus spanked him with her broad, broad hoof. But still the elephant's child was full of insatiable curiosity. Oh, he always said, "Oh, I'm as curious as can be, and oh, what trouble it makes for me. But I learn things from A to Z just by my curiosity." Now, one morning, the elephant's child had a fine new question. He said to his dear families, "What does the crocodile have for dinner?" All his dear family said, "Hush," in a dreadful tone, and then they spanked him immediately and directly and without stopping for a very long time. The elephant's child was very warm, but not at all astonished. And he went walking by himself in the jungle, still saying to himself, "Oh, I'm as curious as can be, and oh, what trouble it makes for me. But I learn things from A to Z just by the curiosity." In the jungle, he stumbled upon the cola-cola bird, sitting in the midst of a wait-a-minute thorn bush. And he said to the cola-cola bird, "Oh, my dear families have spanked me, cola-cola bird, all because of my insatiable curiosity. And still, I want to know what the crocodile has for dinner." And the cola-cola bird said in a very mournful tone, "Why don't you go to the banks of the great, gray, green, greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees, and ask the crocodile?" "Oh, thank you," said the elephant's child. "I shall." And the very next morning, the elephant's child said goodbye to all his dear families. He said, "I'm going to the banks of the great, gray, green, greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees, to ask the crocodile what he has for dinner." And his dear family spanked him once more very hard and for a very long time just for good luck, although he asked them most politely to stop. Now, would you believe it? Until this very weekday hour minute, the elephant's child hadn't the least idea what a crocodile looked like. He had never seen one. But still he set off to the jungle to find his crocodile, saying, "Oh, I'm as curious as can be, and oh, what trouble it makes for me. But I learn things from A to Z just by my curiosity." At last he reached the banks of the great, gray, green, greasy Limpopo River. And the first thing he saw was a bicolored python rock snake curled about a rock. The elephant's child said, "Excuse me, but have you seen such a thing as a crocodile in these most promiscuous parts?" And the bicolored python rock snake said, "Have I seen a crocodile? What will you ask me next? Excuse me, said the elephant's child, but could you tell me what a crocodile has for dinner? The bicolored python rock snake uncoiled himself very quickly from the rock and scuffled down to the elephant's child and spanked the elephant's child with his scales, some flails, some tail. The elephant's child was very warm, but not at all astonished. He thanked the bicolored python rock snake very kindly, and then he went on to the edge of the Limpopo to look for his crocodile. He saw what he thought was a log, but it was really the crocodile. The elephant's child said, excuse me, but have you seen such a thing as a crocodile in these most promiscuous parts? And the crocodile said, come hither, little one, come hither. Closer, closer, for you see, I am a crocodile. And he wept real crocodile tears to prove it. The elephant's child was so excited he panted, and he knelt on the bank and he said, oh, you're the one I've been looking for days and days and days. Please, what do you have for dinner? Crocodile said, come a little closer and I'll whisper in your ear. So the elephant's child came very close and put his head right down next to the musky-tusky mouth of the crocodile. And the crocodile caught the elephant's child's nose right between his teeth. Then, said the crocodile, with his teeth together like this, I think this morning I'll start with the elephant's child. The elephant's child was most annoyed at this, and he said, let go, you're hurting me. Just then the bicolored python rock snake scuffled down and said to the elephant's child, my good friend, if you do not at once and instantly pull as hard as ever you can, your friend there is going to pull you into the water. So the elephant's child sat down on his little haunches, and he pulled, and he pulled, and he pulled, and the crocodile went into the water and threshed the water until it was creamy, and he pulled, and he pulled, and he pulled. And the elephant's child's nose began to stretch. The elephant's child braced his four little feet, and he pulled, and he pulled, and he pulled. His nose kept right on stretching, and the crocodile pulled, and pulled, and pulled. Then the elephant's child felt his 4 feet beginning to slip, and he said through his nose, which by now was 5 feet long, oh, this is too much for me. But just then, the bicolored python rock snake slithered down to the bank and wrapped himself in a clove hitch about the elephant's child's hind legs. And now the elephant's child and the bicolored python rock snake pulled and pulled and pulled, and the crocodile pulled and pulled and pulled, but the bicolored python rock snake and the elephant's child pulled the hardest, and at last the crocodile let go with a plop that you could hear all up and down the Limpopo. The elephant's child sat down with a hard bump, but he was first very particular to thank the bicolored python rock snake. Then he was kind to his poor nose. He wrapped it in banana leaves and hung it in the Limpopo River. The bicolored python rock snake said, what on earth are you doing? Well, excuse me, said the elephant's child, but my nose is badly out of shape, and I'm waiting for it to shrink. Then you'll be waiting a very long time. Some people don't know when they're well off. The elephant's child hung his nose in that Limpopo River for 3 days and 3 nights. Didn't shrink a bit. It just made him squint. At the end of 3 days, a fly came and lit on the elephant's child's back. And the elephant's child, without even thinking, lifted up his trunk and killed that fly dead. Advantage number 1, said the bicolored python rock snake. You couldn't have done that with a mere smear nose. Now, what do you think about something to eat? Without even thinking, the elephant's child reached out with his trunk and pulled up a bunch of grass, dusted it off against his forelegs, and put it in his mouth. Advantage number 2, said the bicolored python rock snake. You couldn't have done that with a mere smear nose. Now, don't you think it's rather warm? It was very warm, so the elephant's child, without even thinking, swooped up a big sloop of mud from the banks of the Limpopo and slapped it on his head, for it made a nice, cool mud cap, all trickly behind the ears. Advantage number 3, said the bicolored python rock snake. You couldn't have done that with a mere smear nose. Tell me, what would you think about being spanked? Excuse me, said the elephant's child, but I shouldn't like it at all. Well, what do you think about spanking someone else? Oh, I should like that very much indeed. Well, You'll find your new nose very useful for spanking people. Thank you, said the elephant's child. I think I'll go home to my dear families and try that out. So the elephant's child hurried home through the jungle to his dear families and said, hello. His dear families were very pleased to see him, and they said at once, elephant's child, come over here and be spanked. But the elephant's child said, pooh, I don't think you people know anything about spanking, but I do. And with that, he took his trunk and he knocked two of his dear brothers head over heels. His brothers picked themselves up and said, ah, bananas. Where did you learn that trick? And what's happened to your nose? Oh, it's a new one. I got it from the crocodile for asking him what he had for dinner. Duh, said the hairy Uncle the Baboon. It's very ugly. Do you think so, said the elephant's child. It's very useful. And with that, he picked up his hairy Uncle the Baboon by one leg and heaved him in a hornet's nest. Then the elephant's child took his trunk and he spanked all his dear families, one after another, very hard and for a very long time, until they were very warm and very astonished. At last, things came to such a pass that all his dear families slipped off one by one to the Limpopo to get new trunks for themselves from the crocodile. And that's why today, all the elephants you see, as well as all the elephants you don't see, have trunks just like the insatiable elephant's child, who still says, oh, I'm as curious as can be, and oh, what trouble it makes for me. But I learn things from A to Z just by my curiosity. Wonderful idea, Benji. And a real live elephant. Oh, what fun. Oh, how I wish Henry and Albert had been here to see it. There they are up in the moon. In the moon.